Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic vault. It's good to be back reviewing new comics. I'm going to bring as many of these to you as humanly possible. I'm going to, today, review Spawn Resurrection #1. As far as I can tell, this is a one-shot that's kind of a transition between Spawn 250 and 251, kind of just getting everybody up to speed and allegedly, sort of. We'll get into that. Getting kind of setting up what the new status quo is going to be. Let me give you a quick warning here. If you have watched any episodes at all of Spawn Year, you will have heard most of this before. My short review of this issue is we're doing what we always do with Spawn, which is we hit a landmark and then we kind of reset things. We pretend like we're not rebooting, but we retcon whatever we don't like right now, and we keep whatever we do like. But it's all very generic and kind of forced, and it would be better served, of course, by just straight up starting over. If you've never read Spawn before, you might enjoy this a lot more than I did, certainly, knowing what I know and being really, really sick of constantly hitting that reset button and having to readjust my thinking and remember stuff, but allowing the book to just keep whatever it wants to be in canon in canon is absolutely infuriating. And I've said this before, but how important is continuity really? It is always an important thing in comics to keep in mind. Sometimes you have so much stuff that is informing a narrative. You have so much history that people don't want to be tied to that canon. They don't want to be tied to that continuity. And we hear this all the time with things like the Star Trek reboot and stuff like that. New blood coming in and not wanting to be tied to continuity. Well, first of all, this is not new blood. Yes, we have a new creative team. Yes, we've got Paul Jenkins writing now, allegedly, instead of Todd McFarlane, but it's pretty clearly a ghostwriting situation. After all, Brian Wood was supposed to be taking over this book, and he wasn't staying inside McFarlane's reins enough. It's pretty clear that's what was going on. He turned in scripts, McFarlane didn't like them, Wood didn't like all the changes that he was going to have to make in order to stay on the book, so he left. So, for all intents and purposes, McFarlane found someone that would just do whatever he told him to do, and I don't know why McFarlane doesn't just keep writing the book himself, because it seems like he basically is. So, nothing against Paul Jenkins, but and the writing here certainly is better than it usually is when it's only McFarlane's name on it. It's crisper, the dialogue is better, it's a lot less clunky, fine, but the storytelling is still what it always has been. It's people standing around talking about mythology and changing random things and making it impossible to enjoy this on the level of like adding things to what you've been reading. So if you're a Spawn fan, if you're a person that's been reading this book for a long time, once again, you have to forget everything you know, except for the things that the book decides that, you know, you're supposed to know. Anyway, it's absolutely infuriating. So how important is continuity really? If the story is excellent, if I care about what's going on, if it's a really good standalone thing that I can take all by itself, I don't care about continuity. If while I was doing Spawn Year, if I had run into more stories where I was like, okay, we hit the reset button at the end, that's really annoying, but while we were there, I was engaged and I cared about the people that I was reading about, and it was really pulling me along, then fine, you know, I understand you can enjoy it on the level of a standalone story. But I submit that if the stories were working more often, McFarlane wouldn't feel the need to keep retconning them. There's a thing that my stepdad, he's known on the channel as the Jeff, said in a comment once on Spawn Year, and I'll never forgive him for it because I wish I'd come up with it. Jeff followed all of Spawn Year. He was really cool. He commented on every single video, and something he said once, and I think this is really true, is that in most narrative, in most stories, the background doesn't change, but what happens moving forward changes naturally. So the stuff that's actually happening as you're moving forward, the future becomes the present, is always changing, and it's informed by background that remains stagnant. Why? Because it happened already. That's not Spawn. With Spawn, it's completely the opposite of that, and it's the most counterintuitive thing I have ever encountered, and I spent 2 years of my life studying this bizarre phenomenon, which is, as Jeff said, the background constantly changing, and the foreground remaining the present, the actual events of the narrative remaining stagnant. Well, that's still what we have here. So this whole issue, and every time I review Spawn, I kind of feel like people are probably going, you have to be making this up. Is this really what's going on? Yes, this is really what's going on. Spawn is... So we've got Al Simmons back, and there was a lot of really convoluted stuff that was done in 250 and kind of sort of leading up to it that led to this, of him coming back, and he's just kind of standing in a big black void talking to a dog. That's the whole issue. It's just Spawn being the mythology of God being explained by God in the form of a dog. It's really clever, right? Because it's God, and it's dog. Dog is God spelled backwards, because nobody's ever thought of that before. At least it's not spelled out. At least it's just this dog talking to Al Simmons, and he never feels the need to talk about how clever it is that he's a dog and his name is flipped around. I don't know whatever happened to Little Old Lady God. I always thought that was really kind of neat, and we kind of dropped it, never came back to it. And of course, then at one point, it turned out that God and the devil were both just horrible children playing around with humanity, and eventually Man of Miracles sucks them into this alternate dimension, and they're never able to come back again. Well, of course, we keep like resetting things and retconning stuff. So apparently, according to this, not only has that never happened, and that was retconned quite a while back, we have had, to be fair, God and the devil reset back to sort of what they used to be since, 185. So I'm not complaining that that's not back in canon, because it hasn't been in canon for a while. However, the idea of God and as far as I remember, the idea of God and the devil kind of both being... on the same level of like morally bereft is I think still kind of been around, sort of. Here, God is portrayed more as the benevolent God who gives humanity free will, and everything horrible that has happened to people is either them doing it to themselves or evil spirits and bad angels and the devil manipulating them. And the stuff that Jenkins and probably McFarlane with him does in this about free will and about how God is not allowed to interfere much is kind of okay, and it could be interesting moving forward. It's just that that's not really been there a lot before. It's always been more that kind of cliche. God and the devil are both just screwing with people, and now suddenly we don't have that anymore. We've kind of backtracked on that. And again, as always, if the story's cool, then I don't mind that. I guess I can kind of, it's obnoxious 250 issues in. Suddenly now we'll be able to kind of play with some interesting ideas of destiny versus free will and all of that stuff. But I'm not holding my breath for it to be great, because again, we're not letting New Blood get to be New Blood and just go its own way, which is really unfortunate. But we still have really convoluted and wonky stuff with the mythology here, especially again if you try to match it up with anything that you've read before, and even with the previous arc. And I see mythology, also history. So new things that have been retconned. First of all, we've just completely dropped the whole Al Simmons is like an evil demigod thing now, and I always thought that was really interesting, or at least a good idea, because maybe not all that interesting, but a good idea, because after all, different writers kept messing with that and trying to make Al Simmons' behavior makes sense, because he's just super impulsive and really mean and evil and just yells at people a lot, and super selfish. And so instead of just not writing him that way anymore, there was a lot of an attempt to make that kind of behavior make sense. This has gone back to not even trying to do that anymore. And so, like, the stuff that we had with Image United, which never finished, is just kind of completely dropped now, and Al Simmons is kind of right back like he was before, except we've dropped all that stuff about how he was evil to begin with. So now he really doesn't make sense again, and he's still just yelling a lot and being annoying, and okay, whatever. We have kept certain bits of his history, so all the stuff with Wanda that you know superficially is kind of still there. So they couldn't have, instead of the whole they couldn't have children thing, we're still going with the she had a miscarriage thing, but we've dropped completely, and I don't think it's just not mentioned, I think it completely dropped the business about Al Simmons forcing the miscarriage and abusing his wife and making that happen on purpose, and then that whole crazy business of him being manipulated to do that by Malbolgia or whatever. That's all gone now, and apparently they almost had a kid, and she had a miscarriage, and now the baby's soul, I guess, is kind of in hell, and Al has to go save Wanda and the baby's soul, I guess, is what the new story is that we're gonna do. I really wish we could move forward. I really wish we could get past Wanda and past Al Simmons' past, because we never add to it. We never do interesting things with it. We just keep changing it, and it remains amorphous. And there's no reason to expect that after this arc, it won't be changed again. That's the problem, is that you can never expect anything to stick in this book. And again, if we'd have a really great story, then that would be okay, but I'm not really expecting that from this. So anyway, that's primarily what's going on at the forefront, is this idea that Wanda, something happened to her, she died, God didn't interfere, because God doesn't interfere, otherwise people wouldn't have free will. And there's this discussion about the flood, and there's been a lot of this stuff in Spawn lately of trying to go to biblical stuff and have some other explanation other than what it says in the Bible that God does things. And so now the flood happened because there were these evil angels that were messing with people, and God felt the need to step in and do something about that. So that's why we had the Great Flood. And also, bad things happen because God purposefully kept away from himself what everyone's destinies were, because otherwise they wouldn't have free will. Again, there could be some interesting things done with that. I don't hate that idea, but anyway, so that's what God is talking about in this, and I guess he feels bad because Wanda died. We're singling her out just because she's connected to Spawn, and Dog God feels bad about it, so he gives Spawn this information, and he gives them the special sword that is really super goofy, and I don't know why you would want this big giant bite taken out of your sword and it not have any point at the front of it. But anyways, so he's gonna, I guess, go to hell and try to save Wanda and maybe this the miscarried baby that originally in continuity, before the other stuff was retconned, he forced to be miscarried in the first place. Also, just like everything else in this book, this is one thing that does remain consistent. Anything that Spawn does is never of his own accord. It's always something that was manipulated by bad guys, usually by Malbolgia. So I noodle this one because I don't understand it at all. Somehow or rather, Malbolgia wanted Spawn to commit suicide, to get him out of the way, to do something to do with Jim Downing. I don't know, because Jim Downing had to sacrifice himself to bring Al Simmons back. And oh, by the way, Malbolgia was allegedly dead and stuck in human form as the Freak, And by the way, this is all stuff that was in the previous continuity that we're pretending like is part of this. So this isn't even stuff that had been retconned yet. But apparently, even though in what I read in the last story that took 6 years and far too many issues to tell, Malebolgia manipulated somehow Spawn to kill himself, and because Spawn has free will, and that's bad for Hell for super vague reasons, and so he committed suicide. Well, like I said, Malebolgia wasn't even in charge at that point, so I don't really understand all that. I guess that's a thing that we're just suddenly changing now. And by the way, a lot of that stuff in this, I mean, this is a $6 giant oversized issue where very, very little happens. I mean, what's done in this could be done in 5 to 6 pages, basically. And I didn't review this, but all I'll say about this is it's a bunch of military people standing around trying to figure out what to do about an apocalypse, and then Jim Downing basically sacrificing himself so that Al Simmons can come back. I don't think he really knows what's going on exactly there, but anyway, what I was getting at with that is that there's really never a payoff for the whole like angel soul in Jim Downing's body thing. I never really quite understood what all that was about. Admittedly, I haven't read past 200, I haven't read all that stuff in one big chunk, so there might be some stuff in there that I'm forgetting, but it's just really super weird that we had all that continuity and all that mythology that was constantly bombarding us instead of actual storytelling. It was pretty much just McFarlane trying to figure out the mythology on the page all the time, and people just kind of standing around talking all the time, very often in black and white voids, and then we get to this, and it's all super ultra oversimplified, and all that stuff, as always, ends up being really, really pointless. And yeah, so all in all, as I said, the writing in this is better than it has been lately. The dialogue is pretty sharp, and I still don't like Al Simmons' characterization. It's consistent with what it was before, but I don't know why we can't just finally make him more interesting and more sympathetic. I still don't know why I'm following this guy, except that he's some kind of chosen one. That's pretty much it. I still don't know also why we're plotting like we're moving toward some kind of big giant reveal, like there's some kind of big mystery moving events along. It's never been true. We always retcon whatever the big giant mysteries seem to be as we were moving along. We need to just let this guy have his powers and go do things and tell some stories, maybe even some smaller stuff. Maybe it doesn't have to be all this big giant cosmic stuff, because McFarlane clearly doesn't really have an idea or a plan for that. This is just a bunch of talking, and so I will say that you probably don't need to read this if you want to read 251 on. This is pretty much just setting things up and pretending to catch people up to speed. On the other hand, if you've never read Spawn before, and I mean never read Spawn before, you probably would enjoy this more than I do, and you might want to give it a shot. Jenkins might have some really cool wild cards up his sleeve. We'll see. I certainly like the status quo better than the previous one with Jim Downing. If we've got to retcon some things, making God actually a good guy might be the best thing for this book. But anyway, so, I don't know, we'll see where things go. Obviously, I'm going to keep buying it because I collect Spawn and I have all of it. But I will check in with it occasionally, but I'm certainly not going to review it issue to issue. So all in all, I'm not recommending this, but if you're curious about Spawn, now's not the worst time to start reading. So anyway, everybody, thanks as always for watching, and if this seemed like somewhat of a meandery kind of review, that's because I don't know how else to do it with Spawn. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. Spawn's so weird for me because it's like the more I know, the more I don't know. And ignorance is really bliss when it comes to Spawn. Somebody once said that the definition of insanity is is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. For me, the definition of insanity is reading Spawn consistently, still reading Spawn and expecting it to ever make sense. So anyway, thanks for watching. I sure appreciate it. And I will see you again very shortly with some more reviews of some new comics. And if you ever want to send me or Vince anything to review, the P.O. Box is right here. And in the meantime, I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.